Nefertiti. Queen Nefertiti, whose name means the beautiful has come, is the wife of King Amenhotep IV, who later became Akhenaten, pharaoh of the family 8, the famous 10 protectors of Tutankhamun. She was considered one of the most powerful women in ancient Egypt. She lived a short period after her husband's death and helped Tutankhamun to take over the king, and this beautiful queen had a high status during her husband's rule. She belongs to the 18th dynasty, and she lived in the 14th century BC, and like what happened with her husband, her name was erased from historical records and her pictures were distorted after her death. Nefertiti is famous for the bust of her illustrated face carved on a piece of limestone in one of the most wonderful pieces of art from the ancient era, and it is the most famous drawing of Queen Nefertiti. Its origins. The origins of Queen Nefertiti are uncertain, and it is believed that she was the daughter of Ai, the army chief, and her nurse was the wife of Minister Ai, who is likely to be a brother of Queen Tia. I never mentioned himself as Abu Nefertiti. Although there are references indicating that the image of Nefertiti's sister, the death of Notpant, was decorated with the tomb of Ai. Her role as a wife. Queen Nefertiti participated with her husband in the worship of the new god Aten, the power of the sun disk. It shines because the beauty has come. Nefertiti is remembered by the bust of her depicted face carved on a piece of limestone in one of the most wonderful pieces of art from the ancient era and is the most famous portrait of Queen Nefertiti, which was found by the German Egyptologist Ludwig Burchard on December 6, 1912, at Thutmose's workshop the sculptor at Amarna. Burchard fled the complete, unscratched, statue to his home in the Zamalek district of Cairo, and from there fled to Germany, hidden in worthless shards of pottery, sent to Berlin for restoration. There is another statue of Nefertiti's head in the museum. The Egyptian is made of red quartz and decorated with touches of ink. It is no less accurate than the head in Berlin, but it is less famous. One of the royal titles of Nefertiti is the wife property. The great Nefertiti gave birth to 6 daughters from Akhenaten. Merit-Aten was born in Thebes before moving to a sister furnace. Mekt-Aten. Apix-that-Pa-Aten, who married Tutankhamun. Neferneferu-Aten Tashri. Neferneferu-Ra. Stephen-Ra. Her life. Queen Nefertiti participated in her husband's worship of the new religion, which is the worship of the Aten, the power of the sun disk, and she and her husband were the mediators between the people and the Aten. During the early years of her husband's rule, Nefertiti changed her name according to the change of her creed to Neferneferuchen Nefertiti, which means Aten that rises because beauty has come. She appeared with him during ceremonies and rituals, and in family scenes, even in traditional scenes of military campaigns, in which she was depicted as she was eliminating enemies. Her statue. Nefertiti is remembered by the bust of her illustrated face carved on a piece of limestone in one of the most wonderful pieces of art from the ancient era. It is the most famous drawing of Queen Nefertiti. It was found by the German Egyptologist, Ludwig Burchard, on December 6, 1912, in the sculptor's workshop. Thutmose in Tel Amarna. Burchard escapes the full statue, unscratched, to his home in the Zamalek neighborhood in Cairo, and from there he fled to Germany, hidden among smashed pieces of worthless pottery, sent to Berlin for restoration. There is another statue of the head of Nefertiti in the museum. The Egyptian is made of red quartzite and decorated with touches of ink. It is no less accurate than the head in Berlin, but it is less famous. It is not yet known whether there is a mummy of Queen Nefertiti or not. What is certain is that scientists found mummies in the secret chamber of Akhenaten's tomb. In the 19th century, the French archaeologist Victor Loret, when opened one of the cellar's walls, to a side crypt that contained 3 mummies, one of a man and 2 of women, one of whom was younger than the other. At the time, these mummies did not arouse any interest, and they were photographed in 1907, and they are now forgotten. But recently, scientists have had some suspicion that one of these two mummies is Nefertiti. In 2002, British researcher Joanne Fletcher of New York University, an expert on mummies, announced that the remains of the young mummy belonged to Queen Nefertiti, and confirmed that this was an indisputable fact. "It was the most amazing discovery of my life." She said this after she was allowed to subject the mummy to examinations, including X-rays. "The best evidence that one of these two mummies is the beautiful woman who came is the high quality of the mummification and the anatomical similarity with descriptions of Nefertiti's remains. At the very least, that is what Mrs. Fletcher saw in the mummy's organs in the neck, shoulders, and most importantly in his face. The bald mummy had a shaved head to wear a special wig. Apparently, Fletcher has found the wigs. However, this claim became the subject of later disputed contention by the Egyptian authorities. The examinations also showed traces of a leather belt imprinted on the mummy's forehead. And traces of the presence of two earrings in the left ear were seen earlier in some photos of the queen. And a little later, near the mummy was found her broken hand, and she held the scepter, and this, as is known, is a feature of the authority of the pharaohs. That is why Joanne Fletcher did not suspect that Nefertiti's remains were finally found. Contrary to the case of colleagues who doubted and believed that these remains were nothing but the mummy of a young woman of the royal family, who perished during the 18th dynasty. He also criticized Dr. Zahi Hawass, the former Minister of State for Egyptian Antiquities Affairs, who is considered the most prominent Egyptologist and is now the Secretary General of the Egyptian Supreme Council for the Protection of Antiquities, researcher Fletcher, stressing that the mummy referred to by the researcher is of a girl between 16 to 20 years old, while Queen Nefertiti was older years old. Now Egyptologists are studying the mummy of the second lady from Akhenaten's tomb. Here, too, we can talk about similarities between her and the queen, and it seems that the final word will be for DNA analysis. Such analyses help determine the personality of each of Tut's grandmothers Ankhemen and Akhenaten himself, who was already the father of Tutankhamun. The question that arises is the mummy known with the code KV35 or Queen Nefertiti? Probably. Or maybe not. Doubts about her motherhood are directed not only toward her but also towards Akhenaten's sister. It is known that Nefertiti was his first wife, and her life. One of their daughters, Akhenaten, died, and their grief for her is depicted in some of the frescoes. After the death of their daughter, Nefertiti disappeared from the royal court and was replaced by her daughter Meritaten, taking the title of Great Royal Wife. After the 12th year of Akhenaten's rule, Nefertiti disappeared and there was no mention of her. It is believed that she died and was buried in the tomb of Bakht. Aten is also believed to be Tutankhamun transferred her mummy with his father Akhenaten when a sister deserted the furnace. Her grave. Egyptologists have been unable to determine the location of Nefertiti's tomb during years of research after the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. In 2015, Dr. Nicholas Reeves from the University of Arizona, that he may have found the tomb of the aforementioned queen and that she may have been secretly buried inside Tutankhamun's tomb because the examinations showed that there may be an entrance in Tutankhamun's tomb. And that this door may lead to the burial place of Queen Nefertiti. The digital scan showed that there are remains of two places that were used as doors, and therefore Reeves hypothesized the existence of a secret passage leading to other burial chambers and said that this is probably the reason why Tutankhamun's tomb is smaller than the rest of the tombs of the pharaohs of Egypt. Century, specifically in 1912. One of the most important German research teams led by the German Egyptologist Ludwig Burchard found the head of the beautiful Egyptian queen, Queen Nefertiti, in the city of Akhenaten, or Amarna in the Governorate Minya today, which was built by King Akhenaten in 1365 BC, to be the capital and headquarters of the monotheistic faith of Aten, before it was destroyed and its palaces looted, before Tutankhamun, his successor, moved the capital again to Thebes to revive the faith of Amun.